I overheard my parents laughing about how they used my money for Christmas gifts and how they banned me from the house for questioning them. I never planned revenge, but when I realized I owned a 3 million villa they couldn't touch, everything changed. Please stay with me as I tell you my story, and please do not forget to support our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing with your loved ones. I froze as I listened, heart sinking, realizing every dollar I had saved, every sacrifice, had been twisted into something I wasn't allowed to question. Mark and Elaine joked about how helpful I had been and how I was now an inconvenience rather than family. I thought back to my college years, the countless nights I worked extra hours, the small investments I made, the scholarships I applied for, all to build a future they were now treating like their personal ATM. It wasn't just money. They were erasing my effort, my independence, my sense of trust. For a long moment, I stayed silent, letting the words sink in. Their laughter echoed through the hall, cruel and casual. I realized I had always been careful, polite, always willing to help, and yet all of that had been seen as an obligation, something to exploit. My generosity had become a tool for their entitlement. I felt a mix of shock and anger, but most of all, clarity. After that day, I stopped thinking of them as the center of my world. I remembered the villa I had quietly purchased months ago under an LLC. The thought made my chest tighten, not with fear, but with a strange, exhilarating freedom. Here was proof that I could create, protect, and own something entirely mine. For the first time, I considered what it meant to step away, to set boundaries, and to redefine my version of family. That evening, I sat in silence, imagining a different kind of Christmas, one where I was not the source of someone else's comfort or greed. I knew then that I had a choice, to remain trapped in their narrative or to step into my own life, one I built with intention. That night, I understood that betrayal wasn't the end. It was a door opening to independence, to self-respect, and to a version of me that no one could take away. I sat in my small apartment, staring at the numbers on my laptop. Every figure told a story of effort, late nights, and careful planning. Scholarships I had earned, freelance work I had taken on while studying, and consulting contracts I had fought for, all built the foundation of my life. On top of that, there was an investment I had made at 21, risky but calculated, one that grew steadily over the years. All of it was meant for my future, not for someone else's convenience. I remembered how my parents always spoke about money as if it came from their wisdom, not from my sweat. They acted like they guided me, like they deserved a share of my choices, yet they had never contributed anything substantial themselves. Their approval had always come with conditions: help with errands, emotional labor, or participation in their plans. I could see now how cleverly they had blurred love and obligation, how they had made me feel guilty for saying no, as if refusing was selfish instead of protective of myself. Curious and cautious, I opened the accounts they had been using. Every withdrawal, every transfer, every small favor they claimed was logged clearly. Nothing was accidental. The money I had put aside for travel, for dreams I barely dared to say out loud, had been slowly redirected, not out of need, but out of entitlement. They had made rules in their minds that justified taking what wasn't theirs. Reading the statements, I felt a strange mix of anger and relief. Anger for their manipulation, but relief that the truth was undeniable. No more wondering, no more second-guessing. I realized that this wasn't just about money. It was about respect, about boundaries, about seeing my efforts as mine alone. They had treated generosity as permission to take, and that was something I would never allow again. This clarity made the decision easier in my mind. I needed to protect my life and my resources, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. That evening, I felt a quiet strength settle over me. For years, I had been shaped by others' expectations, pressured into giving and forgiving. Now, for the first time, I was shaping my own path. The numbers, the accounts, the proof, they were not just money. They were freedom, autonomy, and the first real step toward a life where no one could exploit my work. I finally understood that wealth was not just financial. It was control over my own choices, and no one could take that away unless I allowed it. I took a deep breath before calling my parents, telling myself I wanted answers, not drama. I hoped for honesty, maybe even a little remorse. When Mart picked up, I spoke calmly, explaining what I had discovered and asking why they had used my money without telling me. I expected tension, but nothing prepared me for the storm that followed. Mark's voice rose quickly. He accused me of being selfish, of thinking the world owed me something. Elaine jumped in, insisting that family money was a different kind of rule, that I didn't understand how things worked. Their words weren't about me. They were about control, about shaping the story so they could remain right no matter what. I tried to respond, to reason, but every sentence I spoke seemed to fuel their anger instead of opening their eyes. Then came the line I will never forget: "Don't come back here if money matters more than blood." It wasn't just a refusal, it was a verdict. I was suddenly cast out, not for any mistake I had made, but because I valued fairness and honesty over blind obedience. They had drawn a line, and I was on the wrong side. I hung up the phone without a word, letting the silence fill the space between us. It was strange. There were no tears, no shouting, just a clear, cold realization. The people I had called family had limits, and those limits were not about love or care. They were about authority and expectation. I understood then that any reconciliation would come only if I obeyed rules that felt wrong to me. Walking away from their house that day, I felt an unexpected sense of clarity. I had known love could be complicated, but I hadn't realized it could be conditional in such a precise and hurtful way. The traditions, the gatherings, the holidays, they meant nothing if respect was absent. That day marked a turning point. I stopped hoping for approval and started thinking about boundaries. I didn't need to prove anything to them, and I didn't owe them access to my life. Being banned wasn't just exclusion. It was a mirror showing me what I would no longer tolerate. For the first time, I accepted that family ties don't automatically come with kindness, and that sometimes the only choice is to step back and protect yourself. I drove along the winding coastal road, the ocean stretching wide and calm beside me. The villa I had bought months ago came into view, its sleek glass walls reflecting the late afternoon sun. I had purchased it quietly, under an LLC, careful to keep it separate from family knowledge. It had always been meant as an investment, a place of peace, a space I could call entirely my own. Stepping inside, the quiet hit me. The sound of my footsteps echoed softly across the marble floors. The house smelled faintly of fresh paint and salt air. Every corner, every window, every room had been chosen with intention. Here, no one could make decisions for me, or judge how I spent my time. Here, I could think, breathe, and plan without interference. I walked to the large balcony overlooking the cliffs. The ocean waves crashed steadily below, and I felt a strange mix of relief and empowerment. This place was mine. Mine to keep, mine to protect, mine to enjoy without fear of interruption. It wasn't just money or property. It was control over my own life, proof that I could build something real and lasting, separate from the chaos of my family. For the first time, I considered what it meant to set real boundaries. I didn't have to reach out, explain, or apologize. The villa wasn't just a home. It was a statement. I could decide who entered and who didn't. It reminded me that independence wasn't about isolation. It was about having the power to make choices without pressure or manipulation. Sitting in the living room, I let my mind wander. Christmases, dinners, calls, they all felt smaller here, less urgent. I could see clearly how much energy I had wasted trying to meet expectations that weren't mine. I didn't have to reconcile or negotiate my worth, my life, my space, my rules. This was the reality I wanted. As the sun dipped lower, painting the room in gold, I realized something important. The villa wasn't just a retreat or an investment. It was freedom. Freedom from guilt, from obligation, from people who didn't value honesty or respect. I understood that I could enjoy my life fully without waiting for anyone's approval. For the first time, I felt complete autonomy, and it was more powerful than any apology or reunion my parents could ever offer. I spent days planning the Christmas gathering, but it wasn't about tradition or obligation. I wanted a space where warmth and laughter came without expectation. I sent invitations to people who had genuinely cared for me over the years, mentors who guided me without judgment, neighbors who always checked in, friends who valued my company instead of my bank account, coworkers who respected my time. No one connected to guilt, manipulation, or old family pressures. The villa was prepared carefully. Simple decorations, soft lights, and a tree with thoughtful ornaments created a cozy atmosphere. I chose music that felt comforting, not loud or extravagant, and prepared food that people would enjoy without fuss. Everything reflected a sense of intentional calm, a quiet elegance meant to celebrate connection, not show off wealth. This gathering wasn't a statement aimed at anyone else. It was a choice to honor myself and the people who had stood by me. Guests arrived with smiles, carrying small tokens of care rather than expectation. Conversations flowed easily, free of criticism or hidden agendas. I noticed how much lighter the air felt without the tension I had carried for years. People laughed, shared stories, and offered genuine compliments. I realized that joy didn't require drama or sacrifice. It came naturally when I was surrounded by honesty and kindness. At one point, someone asked where my parents were. I didn't explain in detail. I simply said, "They're not part of this celebration." There was no bitterness in my voice, only clarity. This was a night about presence, choice, and self-respect. It was proof that family doesn't have to be defined by blood. It can be defined by those who truly care. As the evening went on, I noticed a calm I hadn't felt in years. The absence of old pressures created space for genuine connection. Watching people laugh and enjoy themselves, I understood something important. Traditions and holidays only have meaning when they bring happiness, not obligation. This Christmas was different, not because of grandeur or gifts, but because it was entirely mine. By the end of the night, I felt a quiet pride. I had created a celebration built on respect, warmth, and intention. No one had dictated how it should feel. I realized that choosing myself wasn't selfish. It was necessary. That evening, I learned that it was possible to honor the spirit of the season without surrendering my boundaries or my peace. It didn't take long for my parents to hear about the Christmas gathering. Somehow, through cousins and distant relatives, news of the villa and the party reached them. I wasn't surprised. They had always expected to be in the center of everything, but this time, I had no intention of including them. Their reaction, however, was exactly what I had anticipated. Elaine called first. Her voice was sweet, almost concerned, but I could hear the underlying tension. She asked how I was, what I had been doing, and subtly steered the conversation toward the villa. Her questions were polite on the surface, but it was clear she wanted a reason, an excuse to be invited. I answered calmly, keeping details minimal, letting the silence speak as much as my words did. Then came Mark's voicemail. It was sharp and accusatory, filled with indignation and disappointment. He demanded explanations, asked why I had chosen to exclude them, and implied that I was being ungrateful and cruel. Listening to it, I felt a strange combination of satisfaction and detachment. The anger in his voice confirmed what I had already known. They believed entitlement outweighed boundaries. I didn't respond immediately. I didn't feel the need to justify myself. I kept every message, not as a trophy, but as evidence of clarity. Each call, each voicemail, revealed their true intentions and feelings. Their words, instead of causing guilt, strengthened my resolve. I realized that attempts to manipulate or pressure me would only confirm why I had set the boundaries in the first place. I didn't delete anything. I let it sit, a reminder that honesty and truth were more valuable than appearances or approval. For the first time, I could see how differently we viewed respect and attention. While they believed presence and inclusion were owed to them, I understood that respect had to be mutual. The villa, the gathering, the choices I had made, they weren't just for celebration, they were lessons in autonomy, in self-preservation. That week, as I listened to their messages again, I felt an unshakable calm. Their frustration, their anger, their sense of betrayal. It wasn't my responsibility. I had created a space for people who valued me, and that was enough. The realization was liberating. I didn't need permission to celebrate my life or protect my boundaries. The villa, the gathering, and my decisions were mine alone. And no call, no voicemail, no attempt at guilt could take that away. The villa glowed softly that Christmas evening. Warm lights reflected off the windows, and the air was filled with quiet laughter and easy conversation. People moved around freely, bringing dishes they had prepared with care, sharing stories, and enjoying each other's company without pressure or expectation. The atmosphere was calm, yet full of life, a sharp contrast to the tension I had grown accustomed to with my family. Guests complimented the decorations, admired the view of the ocean, and offered small, genuine gestures of appreciation. No one demanded attention, no one criticized, and no one brought hidden motives. The simplicity of it was refreshing. I realized how much I had missed this kind of connection, where people stayed for the presence, not for what they could take. At one point, someone asked casually where my parents were. I looked around, seeing smiling faces, and felt no need to explain the situation in detail. I simply said, "Not everyone deserves access." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of my boundaries. There was no bitterness in my tone, just calm certainty. The statement wasn't meant to hurt anyone. It was a quiet declaration of the life I was choosing for myself. Throughout the evening, I noticed the difference in energy. Without my parents' presence, the gathering felt free, unforced, and warm. People laughed louder, shared stories more openly, and treated one another with respect and genuine interest. Their absence, which once might have felt painful, now felt like a relief, a protective space I had created for myself. As the night went on, I understood something I hadn't before. Peace could be more powerful than confrontation. I didn't have to argue, prove a point, or demand recognition. The calm strength of my choices, the respect for my own boundaries, and the joy of those around me spoke louder than any debate or accusation could. By the end of the evening, the villa felt alive, but in a gentle, intentional way. The happiness in the room was quiet, but real. I watched people leave with smiles and hugs, and I felt a deep satisfaction. I had created a Christmas that wasn't defined by obligation or conflict, but by choice, respect, and freedom. That night taught me that sometimes absence can be stronger than presence, and that true peace comes from standing firm in your own life while sharing it with those who truly value you. The sound of a car pulling up caught my attention. I walked to the gate and saw my parents standing there, faces red with anger and embarrassment. They expected me to let them in, to apologize, to explain myself. Instead, I stayed calm and took a deep breath, knowing this moment required clarity, not emotion. Mark stepped forward first, voice sharp, demanding to know why they hadn't been invited, why I had excluded them, why I thought I could host without their approval. Elaine followed, her words coated with fake concern but dripping with accusation. They repeated familiar lines, implying that I had overstepped, that I had been unfair, that my choices were somehow selfish. I listened quietly, letting each word settle, then reached for the folder I had prepared. Inside were the statements, the dates, the transfers, all carefully documented. I showed them clearly, pointing out every movement, every explanation. There was no anger in my tone, no sarcasm, no attempt to belittle them. I simply presented the facts. The numbers spoke louder than arguments ever could. As they glanced through the papers, I noticed their expressions shift from indignation to shock, then to uncomfortable silence. They realized, too late, that there was no twisting this story, no reframing the truth to suit their expectations. The control they had always assumed over me didn't exist here. The power was in transparency and honesty, and in my refusal to be intimidated. I spoke once more, steady and firm, summarizing calmly what they had already seen. The money had been mine, the decisions had been mine, and the boundaries were clear. There was no room for negotiation. They opened their mouths, tried to argue, but I didn't respond. I let the evidence, the calmness, and the certainty carry the weight. Then I walked to the gate and closed it. The sound of the latch clicking into place was final, more powerful than any words. I didn't shout. I didn't slam doors. I didn't need to make a scene. The confrontation was over because there was nothing left to debate. Standing there, watching them retreat, I felt a quiet sense of triumph. Not from cruelty, not from revenge, but from knowing I had acted with integrity and strength. I had drawn the line, made the rules, and protected my life without compromising my peace. After the holiday, I spent the next few days focused on securing my life and my finances. I closed old accounts, changed passwords, and removed any joint access my parents might have had. Every step I took was precise and deliberate. It wasn't about showing off or proving a point. It was about protecting what I had worked for and ensuring that no one could take advantage of me again. I drafted a formal letter, outlining clear boundaries. I explained calmly what behaviors were unacceptable and what I expected moving forward. There was no anger, no blame-laden language, just facts and expectations. It was a way to communicate that respect was required, and that access to my life or my resources would only be possible under conditions that honored honesty and trust. When my parents tried to reach out, there was hesitation in their voices, a sense that they were testing the new rules. I responded minimally, repeating only what was necessary and standing firm. Their attempts at reconciliation were brief and cautious. They realized quickly that I was serious about the boundaries I had set. I didn't react emotionally or negotiate. I simply maintained the structure I had put in place. During this process, I reflected on the meaning of power. It wasn't in confrontation, yelling, or dramatic displays. It was in calm decisions, consistent enforcement, and thoughtful planning. Power meant being able to act without fear, to make choices for myself, and to protect my well-being without needing approval from anyone else. I felt a sense of control that I had never experienced before, not because I had wealth or property, but because I had clarity and resolve. I also recognized a pattern that had repeated over the years. People only respected consequences, not words alone. If there were no firm lines, my boundaries would be ignored. I made a mental note to never allow myself to be manipulated again. Growth, I realized, was quiet and steady. It was built on deliberate actions, not emotional reactions, and it created a life where respect and trust mattered more than entitlement or expectation. By the end of the week, everything felt secure. The villa, my accounts, and my personal rules were all aligned with the life I wanted. I didn't need validation or praise. I had reclaimed control in a way that was sustainable, consistent, and true to myself. This was what power really looked like, not in loud victories, but in careful, unwavering action. Months later, I prepared a quiet dinner at the villa. The place no longer felt like a fortress or a symbol of distance. It felt like home. The rooms were warm with soft lighting, the table set simply but thoughtfully, and the air carried the aroma of fresh food. I wanted the evening to be calm, a gathering built on connection rather than obligation. Guests arrived, close friends and people who had always supported me, bringing laughter and conversation rather than expectations. There was no tension, no judgment, only genuine interest in each other's company. Watching them settle in, I felt a sense of ease I hadn't known in years. This was a family chosen through care and loyalty, not through bloodlines or guilt. As we shared the meal, I reflected on how much had changed. The betrayal I had endured could have made me bitter or harsh, but instead it taught me precision, how to set boundaries, protect myself, and make decisions intentionally. I realized strength wasn't about revenge or anger. It was about knowing your worth and living in a way that honors it. The people around me understood and respected that, and that was more fulfilling than any reconciliation with those who had hurt me. I thought about my parents and the choices I had made. I hadn't lost family, I had simply redefined it. I no longer funded relationships that mistook generosity for ownership or kindness for obligation. I had created a life where respect and honesty guided connections, and that made the absence of toxic expectations feel natural, not painful. The evening ended with quiet conversations, smiles, and a shared sense of calm. There was no need for dramatics or declarations. The strength I had built was silent but steady, reflected in every decision I had made and every boundary I had maintained. It wasn't about proving something to anyone else. It was about living with clarity and peace. As I looked around the villa, I felt contentment. This was my family now, chosen, trusted, and valued. The house, the dinner, and the evening itself weren't just moments. They were proof that loyalty and care mattered more than tradition or obligation. I understood finally that love and respect could be deliberate, and that building a life with intention was the truest form of strength I could have. Do you think I was right to cut my parents out and protect my life? Or should I have tried to forgive them? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your opinion. Subscribe for more stories like mine.